Today's talk video will be centred around the Atlantic hurricane season. I'll put up on the screen Tropical Storm Florence tracking map. So that out of all the systems in the Atlantic, I guess this will be the biggest story. But Florence isn't the only thing to talk about. Remnants of Gordon, still moving north-northeast at 8 miles an hour. Over there in the central states, still dumping troublesome amounts of rain. Slow moving system, still causing problems, even though Gordon made landfall days ago. Another area, I call it disturbance number 1. That's a large area of cloudiness and showers centred a few hundred miles west of Bermuda, associated with a trough of low pressure. Development of the system, if any, should be slow to occur during the next couple of days. They're only giving it a 20% chance. Not worth spending a lot of time on that. And Florence will eventually be moving into that area anyway. So there's Tropical Depression 9. There, they started advisories on. The depression continues to be impeded by moderate easterly shear with the centre of circulation decoupled to the east of a deep convective band feature. The dynamical statistical intensity guidance as well as the large-scale models indicate that the shear should diminish to less than 10 knots within the next 24 hours. A more favourable upper wind pattern along with warm oceanic temperatures expected to promote steady strengthening commencing after that time. As for steering, westward motion with a gradual increase in forward speed. So when I take a look at the map on that particular system, it strengthens tropical storm, then a hurricane, and is moving in a general westward direction and eventually moving towards the Leeward Islands. So, something to watch down south. The next system is going to be the one that just off the west coast of Africa at the moment, already designated Tropical Storm Helene. Now, a quick look at the discussion on Helene. The outflows fair in all quadrants, will be moving over warm waters and within an environment of light shear through the next 3 to 4 days. Most of the guidance responds to that environment by gradually strengthening the cyclone. Maybe up to hurricane intensity in about 3 days. As the cyclone moves away from the African coast, it will become steered by the easterly flow around the subtropical ridge and should increase in forward speed. Most of the track models are in extremely good agreement, at least for the next 3 days, when the confidence in the forecast is high. At the long range, a mid-level trough is expected to develop over the central Atlantic, forcing the cyclone to turn more to the northwest and even north later on. So that would be Tropical Storm Helene. Now turn the attention to Tropical Storm Florence. So generally, Florence at the moment is moving toward the west, near 7 miles an hour, and this general motion is expected to continue for the next couple of days. A west-northwestward motion with an increase in forward speed is expected during the early to middle part of next week. On the forecast track, the centre of Florence will move over the waters of the southwestern Atlantic Ocean through Wednesday. Wind speeds at the moment are sustained near 60 miles an hour with higher gusts, and little change in intensity is expected during the next day or so, but re-strengthening is forecast over the weekend. Well, here in the UK it already is the weekend. Florence is forecast to become a hurricane again Sunday, a major hurricane early next week. So Tropical Storm Florence has a very interesting discussion from forecaster Blake. I'm going to read it out. It's Florence discussion number 35 from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. Florence remains a sheared tropical cyclone at this time. Satellite images indicate that the low-level center is partially exposed on the southwesterly edge of a large convective mass, with the overall circulation somewhat elongated from southwest to northeast. While the winds at 200 millibar are already from an easterly direction near the center of Florence, there is significant shear from northwesterly winds from 300 to 500 millibars, undercutting the outflow layer. This shear is forecast to relax by the global models over the next 36 hours as an anticyclone builds to the north of the storm, which should promote some strengthening by Sunday. After 48 hours, the deep layer flow becomes easterly near the cyclone with very little shear, while the system is over very warm waters. This pattern favours significant intensification. Most of the guidance brings Florence back to a Category 4 hurricane in 4 or 5 days. The intensity forecast is very similar to the last one and is raised slightly at days 3 and 4 to come into better agreement with the guidance. It is interesting to note that even with a lower initial intensity, the guidance is higher than the last cycle, which speaks to the strength of the signal for intensification in the long range. The initial motion estimate 265 degrees at 6 knots. Florence is expected to continue moving slowly westward for the next 48 hours under the influence of a weak mid-level ridge over the western Atlantic. By days 4 and 5, an exceptionally strong blocking ridge is forecast to develop between Bermuda and the northeast US and build westward, keeping Florence on a west-northwestward trajectory with a notable increase in forward speed by the end of the forecast period. It feels like a broken record to mention that the overall guidance envelope keeps shifting southwestward, and the official forecast is moved in that direction. Unfortunately, with such a large well-defined steering current from the ridge becoming likely, the extended range risk to the United States keeps rising, which is confirmed by the majority of the latest ensemble guidance. Key messages. Regardless of Florence's eventual track, large swells are affecting Bermuda and will begin to affect portions of the US East Coast this weekend, resulting in life-threatening surf and rip currents. So it's amazing how far ahead when you see what the position of Florence is right now, and as a tropical storm as well. It's way out there beyond 55 west on the map grid coordinates. It just goes to show how far ahead the swells generate outward from the centre of the storm. The risk of other direct impacts associated with Florence along the US East Coast next week is increased. However, there is still very large uncertainty in model forecasts of Florence's track beyond day 5, making it too soon to determine the exact location, magnitude and timing of these impacts. Interests near and along the US East Coast should monitor the progress of Florence through the weekend and ensure that they have their hurricane plans in place. Nevertheless, if things continue to trend in this direction, it's big story time. And I strongly advise people to follow Mark Sudduth on Twitter. He'll probably be doing updates at least twice a day on this situation. And he's got decades of experience of intercepting hurricanes. And that just about wraps it up for me for now. So, thanks for watching. See you next time.